Lenin had built a nation based on terror, repression through force, and a lack of freedom of the press, which made the inhabitants of the USSR unaware of how poorly they lived compared to their capitalist counterparts. His successor, Stalin, knew how to do the same, establishing one of the cruelest governments in history. Under Stalin's rule, the Soviet Union underwent rapid industrialization and collectivization, but at a tremendous cost. The implementation of the 5-year plans resulted in forced labor, mass starvation, and the death of millions through deliberate purges and execution.
Did you hear that? Seems like Stalin is dying. I am not moving. Didn't you hear what happened to the last guy that entered his room without authorization? Remember Barry? No, exactly.
When he finally died in 1953, his successor was less of a psychopath and attempted to improve the living conditions in the USSR, ironically setting it on the path to its collapse. Nikita Khrushchev, a reform-minded leader, sought to distance himself from the brutalities of the Stalin era. He initiated a process known as de-Stalinization, condemning Stalin's cult of personality and implementing policies aimed at reducing state control and improving the standard of living for the Soviet people. He reduced executions and shifted his focus towards the technological progress necessary for the Cold War, accomplishing the launch of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, in 1957. This achievement marked a significant milestone in the space race and showcased Soviet technological prowess to the world. However, Khrushchev's tenure was also marked by his controversial decisions and erratic behavior. He had a natural talent for bringing the world to the brink of nuclear war every 5 years. The closest incident was the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1962, the USSR placed nuclear weapons on the island of Cuba at the request of its new communist government led by Fidel Castro. This provocative move, aimed at countering the United States' strategic advantage, brought the world to the brink of nuclear catastrophe. The crisis ended with Khrushchev agreeing to withdraw the missiles in exchange for the USA secretly removing nuclear weapons from certain NATO countries. The secrecy surrounding this agreement made it appear to the world that the USSR had unconditionally surrendered to the demands of the United States out of fear of war, damaging its reputation. Given that there wouldn't be a communist world if Khrushchev ended up destroying it, he was forced to resign, and Brezhnev took his place. Leonid Brezhnev, a conservative leader, reverted to the tyrannical measures that had worked well in the past, achieving significant stability but also causing stagnation. The Brezhnev era was marked by a decline in economic growth, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and a lack of political reforms. The Soviet Union faced increasing challenges in keeping up with the rapid advancements and prosperity of Western capitalist nations. Despite the crisis, the government continued to spend enormous sums of money on the nuclear arsenal and the invasion of Afghanistan, all to avoid falling behind the United States. After Brezhnev's death in 1982, the USSR would see 3 different presidents within a span of just 3 years before finally reaching Gorbachev, who would rule from 1985 until its collapse. Gorbachev would turn out to be the embodiment of ineffectiveness and proposed 3 plans to ensure the prosperity of the USSR, which would ultimately lead to its demise. Gorbachev's reform policies aimed to revitalize the Soviet economy, increase political transparency, and encourage public participation. However, these reforms unleashed forces that Gorbachev struggled to control. Gorbachev started by allowing complete freedom of the press, enabling the population to learn about their poor living conditions compared to the rest of the world, as well as the incompetence of the government. Simultaneously, Gorbachev's policy of non-military intervention created challenges in maintaining control over the satellite countries of the USSR. Protests against Soviet domination erupted in various Eastern European countries, such as Poland, Hungary, and East Germany. Gorbachev's commitment to non-violence and non-interference prevented him from suppressing these movements forcefully, and one by one, these countries distanced themselves from communism. Lastly, Gorbachev allowed non-communist presidents to compete in elections within the countries of the Soviet Union. Due to the growing unpopularity of the communist government, exacerbated by the Chernobyl disaster, these alternative parties often emerged victorious. This resulted in many member countries of the Union, including Russia itself, transitioning to capitalism. The Soviet Union was gradually dismantled as the individual republics sought greater autonomy and independence. Observing how this man, armed solely with his legendary incompetence, had destroyed the entire communist machinery, a coup d'état took place with the aim of restoring the USSR to its original glory. However, this attempt ended in failure and those involved were executed. Finally, on December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union was formally dissolved, and in its place, the Commonwealth of Independent States, CISA, was established. The CIS was a similar association to the European Union, but catered to the former members of the now fallen Soviet Union. The dissolution of the Soviet Union marked the end of an era and the birth of 15 independent states, each embarking on their own unique paths of political, economic, and social transformation. The world watched as the Cold War drew to a close and the geopolitical landscape underwent a significant shift.